been so pleased that she agreed to lead us through this session. I think we have a real treat on our hands in the next 30 minutes. Just as a background, Isidra is originally from Spain. She did her PhD in Spanish and Latin American literature. Some of my favorite authors are in Latin American literature at UC Berkeley. And then she taught there for 10 years, both Spanish language, literature, movies, and creative writing. She's published 2 books, numerous essays. Her piece, My Books and I, was listed as a notable essay in Best American Essays Anthology, published in October of 2019. She has just finished a memoir, and talking to her about memoir writing and the value that it brings to ourselves and the way that we reflect, we'll get into that, but it's been really illuminating for me to spend time with Isidra talking about reciting. Her memoir talks about her journey from repression to liberation, mirroring Spain's journey from dictatorship to democracy. And very exciting, I was on a call with her a few weeks ago when her book was accepted by a literary agent for review, which is a very big step. And there was a lot of cheering in the Zoom room for her to know that happened. I know it's quite a vulnerable process, and it's thrilling to see you get recognized, and we all can't wait for that to be published someday. We know it's going to happen. You can find her at isidramencos.com. We'll email that to you after, on her reflections about living with purpose and accepting your whole self. You can subscribe to her newsletter if you like, and it is a beautiful newsletter. I will vouch for that. Isidra, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Christine, for the great presentation. I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully I can, so that we can start doing that. Oh, the host disabled attendee screen sharing. So can maybe Leslie,
if I can let you in. I just like to say one thing that I think that everyone over the last few weeks has probably thought.
Oh, there's Leslie.
My phone's blowing up. I can't keep up with the text.
Leslie, can you please, I can't share my screen. Could you make me share it?
Oh, of course. Just
thank you.
I'm making you co-host. You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, perfect.
Can you try that?
Yeah.
So there we go. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, here we go.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. How do I do that thing to just show one speaker here? Maybe.
I think you want to go to
speaker one. Yeah, there we are. Perfect. Okay. Christine, I think you have some questions for me.
I do have some questions for you. You started writing fiction, or was it friction?
Both.
Writing fiction, but you currently write memoir and personal essays. Why, Isidra, did you change genres?
Yes. You know, it came a point in my life where I realized that I needed to look back and understand a few things, like, for example, the traumas that I had lived through my childhood, the self-destructive behaviors that I had done during my youth. Also kind of understand the mistakes that I had made and forgive myself for them. And I couldn't do it in fiction. I needed to do it in memoir. And the reason for that is that when you do memoir, you're not just telling a story from your past, but you're also reflecting on that story. And you're using the wisdom that you have accumulated to muse, that's why you call it in memoir, musing over your past story. So I fought that with tooth and nail because I came from fiction. My first book was a book of short stories. I didn't really want to have to do, I don't know why I have you in the screen instead of myself, but let's do this. Okay, I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so I needed to reflect on my life, and as a memoirist, that's what you're doing. You're bringing meaning to your life. You're not just telling a story, you're reflecting about your story and explaining how it went and what you learned. And even though at the beginning I didn't want to do that, as I learned more about memoir writing, and then I read a lot of memoirs, I realized that as a reader, I was looking for those nuggets of wisdom when I was reading memoirs. So that's why I went to memoir.
You said something to me in a conversation about using your current set of, basically the current set of tools that you have now to almost reprocess the experiences that you had earlier in life, that you could use memoir to actually utilize and deploy wisdom now. So you could take the tools that you've learned along the way and maybe reframe the experiences, be them traumatic or otherwise.
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about the power of what you know now and applying that to who you were then?
Yes, I have to say that writing this memoir was such a layered process, because as I wrote more and more, I started seeing things about my life that I hadn't seen before. And it really was a process of digging into the meaning of my life, understanding why things went the way they went. And also, it really entailed a lot of forgiveness, forgiving myself. You have a lot of wisdom now, and we all do as modern elders, that we didn't have when we were 20, we didn't have when we were 5. So as we grew up, sometimes we experience some traumas, and then that trauma created a belief, like, I don't know, my mother doesn't love me or whatever. But then when you start exploring your life and reflecting about it and going really deep on it, oftentimes you realize that that actually is not a belief, it's a misbelief, because that's how you interpret what happened when you were 5 or when you were 8 or when you were 18. And now with the wisdom of time and your life experiences, you can go back and understand much more about what really happened, and relate it in a way that is a lot more complex, and throw in there in that memoir those musings that, I don't know if you can see here, this quote from Judith Barrington about musing in memoir, which is so necessary, which is those nuggets of wisdom of interpreting the past with your new tools that you have today.
One more question along these lines. You said that you realized that you read memoir differently once you started writing memoir, that you enjoyed kind of those self-reflective nuggets in different ways. So do you feel that memoir writing not only helps you understand yourself better, but makes you maybe even a better, more empathetic human?
I think so, because I think one of the key things for memoirists is when you're writing about your past, you may have gone through a lot of trauma and a lot of issues, and there may have been people that hurt you, but everybody has dark and lightness in them. And when you go through this process of memoir writing and you go really deep, you're not out there for revenge. You are out there for understanding. And so when you are going after that understanding, I think that's what really brings this capacity to look at life in a more complex way and understand that nobody's perfect. They hurt you, you've hurt others. We are all in this together, and we're just going through this process of life, trying to learn how to be a better person, right? And that, to me, definitely reading and writing memoir has helped me be a better person and a wiser person.
Thank you for letting me dig into that, Isidra. I know that's a little bit more than we had discussing around memoir, but I really get so inspired every time I hear you talk about this. I know that we want to give everyone in this workshop some real tools and some exercises to do, so we'll move towards that. Can you tell us why you think it's important to, or do you think it's important actually, to write an outline of a book, a story, or an essay before starting to write?
Well, you know, there's two schools of thoughts on that. One is the pantsers, which write by the seat of their pants. They don't plan anything. And the other are the plotters, the ones that like to plot, you know, their story, their essay, their book very carefully. Stephen King, for example, says that he's a pantser. He doesn't plan anything. He just sits down and lets the inspiration take him wherever. I tend to be more of a pantser, but I have learned a lot about tools for plotting my stories, my books, and I have found some of those tools very, very useful. So I wanted to give everybody a few tools that may be useful for them. I don't know. Well, anyway, one is the whiteboard. I learned this from Joyce Maynard, a well-known novelist. I took a one-week workshop with her, and she plots every one of her stories in a whiteboard before she starts writing it. And what she does is she breaks the big page into two, and on the right hand, she puts the elements, and that she throws in there everything but the kitchen sink, anything that may be related to a story idea that she has, everything. It can be very messy. It doesn't matter. Anything related to your story or to your topic, just put it in there. Then on the left side, you start to organize it a little bit. And how do you do that? Well, you try to, let me see if I can do this. That would probably be a lot better. Yes, thank you. Goodness, sorry guys that I had it in the small thing. I don't know why I did that. But here is the brainstorm that can be really, really messy. On the left side, you can put your theme. The theme is really, really important because otherwise what you're writing can go all over the place and you can lose yourself and lose the reader. One thing that can help is use the sentence, I used to, but now, because stories are about a transformation. It's about how you change or the people around you change or the town changes or the situation changes. It doesn't matter if it's fiction or nonfiction. There's always some type of internal or external transformation in an engaging story. So that's why I put this here, I used to, but now. That can be helpful when you're thinking about your theme. And then you can kind of have to build your narrative arc, you know, the beats of your story. The beats would be kind of like the key scenes that carry your story forward. Very usually you will have a build up to the story, a climax, and some type of resolution. I'm going to show you an example that I did with a story of mine. You can see it's very messy. The story was entitled The Dress. It was about a very sexy dress that I used to have and I used to love, but that then all of a sudden I didn't love it anymore. Why? I'm going to explain in the story the why, but this is what I did. I put here all the elements pell-mell, very messy. I tried to figure out my narrative arc. I came on the theme. The dress was only a container, what you call a container. So it was like, you're talking about a dress, but the story is not about the dress. The story is about a theme. And what is the theme? I summarize it here by saying, I am not my dress. I may love the dress is sexy, makes me a magnet for men or whatever, but I am not the dress, right? So after this very messy one, I did a more organized one. And then when I went and wrote the story, it was really easy to write. I had all the elements. I had my narrative arc. It was just so easy to do. And it actually got published in a literary journal. I sent it 2 weeks after it got published. Okay, let me get to the next slide. This is another way, let me make this smaller, another way to think about plot. The algorithm. This is an algorithm that Marion Roach Smith, who teaches memoir writing and essays and personal essays and just narrative essays, always talks about. It's a story about X as illustrated by Y to be told in Z. Why is that important? That is important because you have to have a very clear theme. X is the theme that your story is about. And as I said before, if your theme is not clear, you're bound to be going all over the place. You may be 200 pages into a book and all of a sudden say, I don't even know what this book is about. You know, I'm lost. I got lost. Imagine how the reader is gonna get lost. Then you have Y, which is the actual story that illustrates the theme. So in the case of the dress, my theme was power is internal. It's not your look. It's not your dress. It is something that you have inside yourself. The actual story was the story of that dress. And then the media where it will appear. Are you writing a book? Are you writing for a podcast? Are you writing a personal essay? Are you writing a narrative essay, a how-to book? Depending what you're writing is going to be completely different. So you have to always be thinking about that writing. Okay, a third way Oh, sorry, I jumped one slide. A third way of thinking about plot is thinking about the what and the how, or the what and the why. And this is actually very helpful for reflection about your writing, because a story is not just what happens, but it's about how it changes you, or about why something that happened was actually important. And that is the same for, it doesn't matter if it's memoir or if it is a nonfiction narrative book, if it's fiction, whatever it is, whatever you're writing about is really not just about the facts. It's about why those facts matter, either because they brought a transformation and simply because they were really important for the story. So then what you can do to reflect about your story before you even write it is you can do a 2-tier outline. And you do chapter 1, what happened or what's happening in this chapter, 2 lines, just the plot, what's happening there. And then the second tier is how it changed me, or how it changed others, or how it changed the situation, whatever the story is about, or why it is important. So you have to do this outline for every chapter, and it's just 1 page. 1 line for the what happens, 1 line for why is this important, or what change it brought. And you do it every time. And very important thing, that also allows you to see if every chapter is clearly related to your theme, and if it's advancing the story towards that climax and that resolution. So that 2-tier outline can be very, very good, and it really brings up a lot of reflection.
But we also do want to say, right, that there are 2 very different ways. There are pantsers and there are plotters.
Exactly, exactly.
Tool for plotters, or if you're a pantser, maybe you want to try plotting. You know, we're in strange times. Maybe you try on a new way of working.
That's a very good point, Christina. As I said, I'm more of a pantser than a plotter.
I love these terms. I just wanted
What happened to me is I wrote my memoir, and when I was in the middle of my memoir, I was like, I don't even know where I'm going with this memoir. I was going nuts. You know, it was just like I got blocked. And so then that's when I went back and I did a lot of that outlining to make sure I knew where I wanted to go by the end of the book. So it depends. You can use the tools when you need them, but you don't need to be shackled by the tools either.
I love what you have to say about the medium too, and considering the medium. I think that's, yes, as a pantser, as like a super pantser, I'm never thinking about where it's going. I'm never thinking about where, you know, I'm in what format it will be. So I like the idea of having tools in another situation.
And you can actually use one theme in many different mediums. So for example, you know, an example from Marion Roach Smith, which I mentioned before, she wrote a book about how she took care of her mother who had Alzheimer's, right? And when she published that book, there wasn't a whole lot about Alzheimer's in the market, so it was very successful. Since then, that was more than a decade ago, she has talked about this story in radio interviews, in podcasts, in small personal essays, in big non-narrative, non-fiction essays. She is really used that story or that theme in many different ways, you know, the why in her algorithm, for many different media, which is the Z in the algorithm. So thinking about things that way really opens your mind to, you do not need to come up with new things every day. You have a few obsessions that you're gonna be going back over and over again. And just if you think about, how am I gonna illustrate this theme in a different way for these different media, it's gonna open up a lot of doors for you.
Isidra, what do you say about letting people write? Are y'all ready to do some writing?
Oh yeah, I don't know if, I just wanted to give a little piece of advice before we go into prompts for writing. And I would like for you guys to use a pen and paper if you can, instead of the computer when we go to the prompts. But before we get there, just very quickly, write every day. Write every day. It's very important, even if it's 5 minutes. If you're working on a long project like a book or an essay, even if you write just 5 minutes, the fact that you're touching that work every day is gonna keep it in your subconscious, and it's gonna be working for you without you even noticing. You're gonna be walking the dog and pop, something is gonna pop in your mind, and you're gonna know the ending of a chapter that was giving you trouble. Also, write before you start writing, write in your head. Sometimes it takes me weeks, months, even years to put a story to paper that's been dancing around in my head. So that's very important, that pre-writing reflection. If you don't know what to write, write morning pages. Sit down with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and just let yourself go. Maybe you do it 10 minutes, or you want to do it 10 minutes, and half an hour later, you're like, oh my God, where did the time go? And you enter that state of flow that is so joyful. Fight resistance. We all feel resistance to creating something new. It's risky, but you need to fight it, because when you risk and when you go to something new and you push yourself to create and to write, you're gonna get to know yourself better, and you're gonna find more meaning in your life and bring it to your readers. So keep writing. And now, Jen, let's go to the prompts, Christine.
Let's go to the prompts, but I do want to add, one of the concepts that we talk about at the Academy is using meditation as almost a mental hygiene. Just like you would brush your teeth every day, we go to meditation as a way to calm the mind. And I love this notion that you've brought us to with the morning pages or the everyday writing as just another form of mental hygiene. It's just another tool to put in the toolkit. So thank you for framing it for me that way.
Absolutely. And sometimes I meditate when I'm having trouble with a story. I will meditate before I start writing, and it helps.
All right, so talk us through these prompts as we
Yes. So how much time do we have, Christine? Do we have time for two?
Much. We've got
Not that
about
much? Okay,
left.
so I have 4 prompts. If we only have about 10 minutes left, let's choose one of the 4. I'm going to show you this first one, and then I'm going to show you the other 2. You can choose one of the 4 and then just write for about 3 to 4 minutes. And then at the end, we'll ask if somebody wants to share what they are writing. Just let yourself go. Don't think. Just do it spontaneously. So you can choose either the first time which incidentally is the first few words of Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. The last time or the other ones are, tell me something about silence, what it means to you, or when it has oppressed you, or what it means in your family. And the 4th one is, what have you held on to for too long? So please choose one of the prompts, write for a few minutes, don't get your pen off the paper, just write, and we'll ask somebody to share.
And I'll give you 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when it's time to stop. So go ahead and start writing. All right, and if we can start to wrap up, as in pick your pencils up. Oh, I always wanted to be a teacher. I got to just say it like a high school teacher. Trisha Guthrie, pick your pencil up, please. Thank you. All right, and I believe that Isidra, if anyone was comfortable and wanted to share back, we were going to make that space available now. Isidra, you are going to have to identify who that is, I believe, as the co-host.
Okay, so if anybody wants to share, do you wanna raise your hand? I'm gonna be going, okay, we have Lance over here who wants to share, so I'm gonna unmute you, Lance.
Me?
Thank you for sharing.
Okay. So I chose the Tell Me Something About Silence. In 1994 or so, on the way to Sundance, I stopped my car to sit down and meditate. Something arises here about a washing machine. I think it was a dream I had about this gorgeous red-headed woman I was secretly in love with, though I was already married, soon to be divorced. One day she came to me and asked me to marry her. I was stunned. Then she continued telling me she wanted me to perform her wedding ceremony to marry another man. Anyway, I sat to meditate by the side of a river when suddenly I heard a sound in the silence. It was the first time I had tinnitus.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Very nice, Lance. Do we have another person who wants to share? Just raise your hand. I'm gonna go to the second screen. And I have Wendy Garfield over here. I'm gonna unmute you, Wendy.
Okay, I very rarely write. So thank you for the prompt. So my prompt was, what have I held on too long? My anger has been with me for all of my life. I'm very accustomed to the feeling of it. It percolates. I now try to calm it down. I now know to remove myself before exploding on those I love. I still cannot tease out all of its tentacles that capture my brain and heart, but I know they are not hearkening to the rational, loving sources of myself. They are calling back the old, insecure, deprived habits of my past. Now, I sit in silence before speaking to anyone to avoid the enormous storm.
Wow.
I don't know about all of you, but I have so missed sharing with people like this. I've been on lots of Zoom calls and lots of well-intentioned educational sessions, but Lance, Wendy, thank you so much for sharing those. I also want to acknowledge how exciting it is with how terrifically wrong those last two moments could have gone. And how wonderful they both were. So thank you. Isidra, let's see, what do we have time-wise?
I had somebody, Jay, I think, that wanted to write. I'm trying to locate it. I mean, to read. I'm trying to locate it on the screen.
Okay, we have time for the one last.
There it is. I see you. I see you.
All right.
Hi. So
And
this
can
is
I
my
just
first
jump in
time.
really quick, Christine, Isidra? I'm sorry, but we have a little extra time because of that little tech snafu. So we've got another 5 minutes.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, good shares.
Go ahead, Jay.
It's my first time, so I thought I would do it in a trusted space. I chose silence. Silence is a space where my family's history lies. My father never wanted to discuss the past, only the future. My mother, the opposite. For him, the past was all about the humiliations that he went through. A proud, handsome, intelligent man who had to make his way in this new country. The future was opportunity, and the present a reflection of all his accomplishments as a new immigrant in the American story. His trifecta of 3 kids who went to Harvard, his World Series of Poker bracelet, and his brick house with the roof that was built to last 100 years. For her, it was the past, to hold on to the memories of all those who had suffered and been left behind. The baby half-brother who had been buried in the backyard after her stepfather kicked her mother in the stomach at 7 months, causing her to miscarry. The present and the future she did not want to talk about because those people she holds on to are gone.
Wow. I just want to say, guys, I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing, but also just notice you just wrote for 3 minutes and look what came up in 3 minutes. This deep deep things for each of the three people that read. It is just so amazing that thinking that only 5 minutes a day can get out of you these incredible truths that perhaps you've been burying. I even have like my whole hairs stood up on my arms. It's like, it's just amazing. So the power of giving yourself that moment of reflecting, or not reflecting, just putting pen to paper and write and see what you have inside that you haven't listened to is so important. The world needs that truth and that vulnerability.
Thank you, Isidra. So I think we have some prompts going forward for anyone who is interested.
Yes.
So if you would like to receive a series of 7 prompts, we're gonna do one a day for the next week. Is that right, Isidra?
Yeah, I sent 7. Yeah.
Please send me an email, Christine@modernelderacademy.com, and I will make us a mailing list, and we will have a prompt a day, and we'll figure out a way to share them back, because that was really beautiful and vulnerable. I'm honored that everyone shared the way they did. Isidra, I can't thank you enough. You're
Very welcome. Do we have any more minutes, or are we all done? I just want to.
We've got 2 more minutes.
all right.
Can we hear
If anybody has a question, you can unmute yourself for a moment and ask it, or raise your hand, or I can't. There's so many screens I'm trying to see.
Lisa? Clever?
Yeah, hi. I love what you're saying. So when you have too much information and you said you got drowned by all the writing that you had, you didn't know, then you figured out a way to organize it. What are some of the things you do when you have something? I have things on one computer and on another, and papers, printed out from years, and then I get lost in the editing.
Yeah.
So what do you suggest with that?
Are you talking about different projects, or all about the same project?
The same project, but how do you keep writing but also be creative with when you really do have to edit, when you've written so much and you have to figure out where everything is?
That's a great question, because it happens, especially if you're working over a few years on one project, like a book, right? So I use different methods. One of the things that I recommend is, if you get rid of things, passages, pages, chapters, don't delete them. Have another folder of outtakes, because you may use that later on for another story, or you realize that you were missing that piece and you bring it back into the book. So that's number 1. Have a folder of outtakes. Other things I've done, for example, is spreadsheets. I have so many spreadsheets, but like when I got a little lost with my memoir, I actually have a spreadsheet because it has a big historical context. So I had the chapter, I had what happens on the chapter, I had why this is important, I had the historical context for the chapter. So I really got very organized. I even had like themes in tags so that I could quickly look for themes and where they are in the book to think about the overall structure. So I think I have about 10 or 12 drafts of that memoir. So each draft is a different name, different dates. I just don't get confused, because it's very easy when you're working over so much time. But those are some of the things that I've used to get organized. And definitely from time to time, you just need to print it and go with the pencil and start making notes, and get organized with paper, because it's different than just looking digitally.
Yeah, that's the hard thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.